Hey guys, it's me, the Lit teacher, and are you studying A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams? Well, if you are, you probably know that it's a deeply complicated, compelling play with some incredibly mature themes. And as a 14, 15, 16-year-old student, you're probably finding that pretty challenging, especially when it comes to forming personal responses. So what I've come up with, and it should be really easy for you to remember, is GPT, Gender, Power, Trauma. These to me are the key three themes in the play, and if you can remember these and prepare some personal responses around each one of them, I feel like you're going to be prepared for anything that could pop up in your exams. I'm specifically talking about GCSE and IGCSE Literature in English. This is what I'm studying with my class down here in New Zealand right now, and this has helped them massively in the recent weeks. So let's get straight into things. I want to talk about personal responses more generally. In IGCSE Literature and English, this is Achievement Objective 4, and as I've kind of mentioned, it's one my students struggle with, and it's why I came up with GPT in the first instance. Then I'm going to walk you through gender, power, and trauma, and I'm going to try and ask you a few questions to prompt you to develop some personal opinions here, which you can then roll out in the exam and hopefully do really well with. So let's just talk a little bit about personal response. Now, personal response, Achievement Objective 4, it's essentially like your original ideas, it's your opinions, it's your take on things. What do you think about things is essentially what you're trying to discuss here. Now, as I've kind of suggested several times already, Streetcar's really hard in this respect. It's set in the 1940s, it's about super complicated gender dynamics and kind of really specific political things that were happening at the time in American society as well. So yeah, developing a personal response as a 14 or 15-year-old can be tough. This is why some of my students start to push their personal responses towards things in their own life and try to make some sort of random connection in this respect. And this isn't always a great strategy. It sometimes leads to these weird tangents because you try to tenuously link something from your own life to the play, and yeah, it doesn't really work. So what's good is to prepare around the big ideas in the play, develop some important personal opinions on those, and then use those as a mechanism to discuss personal response in the exam. So let's get into G, which is for gender. Now, if you haven't already figured out that A Streetcar Named Desire is all about gender dynamics and gender politics, then I'm not too sure which play you've been reading, because it's literally fundamental to almost every aspect of the play. The key conflict in the play between Blanche and Stanley is essentially a battle of the sexes, right? It's his toxic masculinity versus her quote-unquote refined femininity and the kind of fireworks that this creates, as well as the kind of desire element that comes out in it as well. This links pretty heavily to the kind of post-war gender dynamics that were at play in American society at the time. If you think about the fact that all the soldiers had come back from war, they're trying to reassert their place in the domestic sphere and the home as well as in society. And yeah, this created some pretty complicated gender dynamics that we saw in the 40s and the 50s and arguably still see today, around the world. And that's the question I think you need to ponder, is have the gender dynamics from A Streetcar Named Desire changed today? Is it still kind of the same? Do we still sort of have these issues that we see in the play in this day and age, regardless of what country you're in? The answer is probably yeah, because I would argue that the dial hasn't really shifted a great deal, or at least not as much as we maybe would like it to have. You probably have some pretty strong opinions on this. It would be really, really hard not to. So if you do, then why not deploy those and talk about gender in the play? It could be a really useful avenue for you to go into some meaningful personal response. Okay, next up is P for power. Now, yeah, the play is also a great deal about power. There's kind of no prizes for guessing that one. Power and gender are also intrinsically linked. It's very hard to separate them from each other. It's why they kind of connect quite nicely in my little acronym. Now, virtually every scene involves some kind of complicated power dynamic, and this is especially true when you're doing the extracts in the exam. Chances are you will get an extract which will involve some kind of power play, and the questions you need to ask yourself is, who has the power at this moment? Has the power shifted? How has the power shifted, and why has the power shifted? And the thing you need to think about is the way in which power is essentially part of our lives 24/7 all of the time. Consider the fact that you have power dynamics that affect your life at school between you and your teacher or your parents, or the way in which power operates within society in terms of class and race and gender. Those complicated power dynamics are there all the time. We see them on a daily basis. And yeah, you probably have some pretty strong opinions about that as well. So if the right question comes up, or if you're doing the extract and the right extract pops up, why not try and say something meaningful about that and push your discussion towards power? Okay, last but not least, it's T for trauma. Now, this is pretty specific to Blanche. If you haven't figured out that Blanche is a deeply traumatized figure, again, I'm kind of not really sure which play you have been reading. A lot of her behavior stems from her trauma. Let's just run through some of the things that have happened to her. Well, first of all, everybody in Belle Reve died. Her husband died, and it's kind of strongly insinuated that she has suffered from abuse in the past. I'm paraphrasing Stella here, but remember when she's talking to Stanley and she essentially says to Stanley, you don't know what she was like? She used to be the sweetest person, and it was people like you who abused her and forced her to change? Yeah, Stella is basically saying that Blanche has been abused and traumatized, and that's a driver for a lot of her behavior, not to mention her incredible addiction to alcohol. And I often think about Blanche as a character who's in a state of arrested development. I don't really feel like she's grown up from the point she was as a 16-year-old girl dealing with the death of her husband. She's kind of still stuck in this state of arrested development, and the trauma has kind of frozen her in that time. And this is why she's so self-conscious about getting old, because she's kind of still so caught up in the past. So today we talk a lot about trauma. It's kind of been a really popular topic in society in recent years, and I think this is fantastic. It's not something they probably talked a heck of a lot about in Tennessee Williams' time, which is why it's quite a meaningful theme in his play. But yeah, we talk about it a lot today, and we also talk about mental health issues and addiction way more than they did in the past. So can you make some strong personal links here? I'm sure you know about this stuff. You've seen it in the media. You've probably formed your own personal opinions on it as well. So again, if you get a question in relation to Blanche or an extract that's maybe dealing with some of the issues I've discussed in this slide, then you could really go to town on trauma, discussing that, maybe mental health, maybe addiction. This would be really, really robust content to go into for personal response in that respect. So that's T for trauma. And that's GPT overall as a strategy for you to think about 3 big ideas in the play and hopefully have formed some personal opinions on them that you can push into your discussions and hit that AO4 personal response and rack up those high marks. I am the Lit Teacher. This has been a video on A Streetcar Named Desire. There'll be a few more coming in the future. I want to break down some key scenes and look at the play in more detail. But until next time, as we say down here in New Zealand, ka kite, goodbye. See you later. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate your support. Until next time.